Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Bradley. I'm the COO of Steel Media, and I'm going to be with you now for the next hour or so. Frank gets to stay on the stage because we have a panel now on the topic of how we can engage and support esports in the region. Now, unfortunately, one of our panelists has been unable to make it. Raina Abbas from Wixel Studios injured herself yesterday and has been unable to travel, so she can't be with us. So Frank and I are gonna hold the fort with, I believe, someone dialing in. So I think we have Philip Wride joining us on Zoom. Philip, you can hear us okay there, I hope?
I can, yes. Masa Okera, everyone.
Perfect. Hi. Thank you for being with us. So I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, but just to say we've got two panelists now, and we're going to try and dive in and put some numbers and some topics on the conversation around esports and how we can engage it in the region. Philip, I'll start with you. You're from Cheesecake Digital. Can you introduce yourself to our audience in a few words? Tell us your background and about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been involved in esports for 21 and a half years. Started at the age of 16, and I've been in the region for the past 7 years. Largely, I've been focusing on strategy work for brands and governments. So some of the projects that I've been involved in the region include supporting Blast for their global finals in Bahrain in 2019, the PIF for the Volve project, which is the network of gaming cafes they're building in the kingdom. I've just done the Minecraft Esports Schools Clash as part of Dubai Esports Festival, and about to go and help Blast with their Abu Dhabi World Finals coming up in a couple of weeks. So a lot of the work that I've been doing has been, strategy and thinking about how we can grow the esports community in the region. But I'm also now starting to do business coaching, and I'm creating esports courses more around the business side of esports, not the playing side, just to be able to help that next generation as they're coming through.
That's perfect. Thanks. Great intro, Philip. Just before I ask Frank, Philip, can you just remind us, where are you zooming in from today? Which region are you in right now?
I am in Dubai, so the region. But yes, because I've just been operating the live finals in Dubai, and I was speaking at a teachers' conference yesterday. I haven't been able to get to Jordan, unfortunately.
No, that's great. Thank you for taking the time. Frank, we were just on stage talking about ePolls, but for those who maybe missed that, or just to recap and set the scene, can you remind us, a little bit about your own background and your company now?
I run a consulting company based out of Singapore, specialized in esports and gaming, and where we have two pillars. One pillar is consultancy, and the other pillar is our own projects. One pillar, and this is one of our biggest clients, is Esports. So we help these companies to grow and scale up and go in other regions, add more games to it, and of course to get more fundings. On the other side, we have our own projects, M42 Esports, it's an esports team, and then we are very strong in esports education. One part is for the serious part of esports, that's esports management, and then the second part, it's training for gaming skills for different games.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. So lots of experience in the room. So if you have any questions that weren't answered in previous panels, please do save them up. I'll have an opportunity to come back to those. So I want to dive in here and talk about how we grow the esports market in the Middle East, how we achieve that. Philip, I'm going to come to you first because it sounds like you've just been right there in Dubai working on it right now. What needs to happen for esports to grow in the Middle East? How do we achieve it? Is it about investment or education? What do we need?
Both, realistically. I think education is an interesting starting point because everybody in the region plays, but those people who control the budgets don't necessarily appreciate what's involved in esports, where the opportunities are, and what it delivers to both the players and the audience. So that education piece of helping people understand is absolutely important. if we can get that level of education, then we'll be able to unlock some of the additional funding, and that will help in the leagues or the events or the ability to develop players. All of those things work together. But yes, there's a requirement for a level of funding. We're starting to see that in Saudi. It may have been already spoken about today, but the strategy that was released by the Crown Prince and how they're now focusing and putting budget against. Okay, so that's a key thing. Dubai has said, okay, we're going to have an esports festival, and we're going to look to do that every year and grow it so that they have something as a focal point in the Emirates. So we're starting to see it, but there needs to be more of that. The more people we can educate and help them understand what esports is and how it works, the easier some of those conversations become around getting investment and growing the space. And the other thing I just want to touch on is consistency and scale. Okay, the region historically has been horrible at being consistent. Okay, and I say that because I've been here for 7 years. It's let's do a big event and nothing for 6 months. We're starting to see that change, but there needs to be more of it, because if there's no consistency, there's nothing to watch and there's nothing to compete in, which means that as a community, you can't grow. Okay, the other thing is about scale. This region historically has always been about, can we do the biggest and the best tournaments? But in reality, that's not always the right approach. People sitting in this room may say, you know what, that sounds like too much of a challenge. If I can create something and create a community of 100, 200, 300 people who are willing to participate in my events or follow my team, and I can generate enough money to pay for myself and a couple of staff members, is that big enough? Potentially, yes. So I think there's also that consideration of what scale do we want to work at, and how do we piece the different elements of the industry together?
That's great, and a really good point about consistency. There's almost no point in not growing a community and then trying to suddenly have a huge tournament once a year or something. In fact, so Frank, I'm going to come to you with the same question, really. Does what Philip says ring true with you? What's your take on how we grow the esports market here?
In general, I agree with what Philip said. I want to add 2 points. One is experience. I think that's important, that we have a knowledge transfer, that we have experienced people, and that's not only about esports, it's also about, and this is my second point, structure, how you create a company, how you run this company, how you scale a company, or what Philip said, if you want to have a continuity, how you do that. So this is, I think, maybe not only in the region here important, maybe in the general in esports, but that's 1 point or 2 points what I see. It's experience, knowledge transfer, and on the other side, structure.
Interesting, yeah. The knowledge and structure, as Philip mentioned, there's the investment, for instance, in the Saudi government has put money into esports with a target, I think, of being a global leader in esports by 2030. Is that right, Philip? And I guess that some of that needs to be about bringing...
Yes, it's part of the 2030 vision.
Yeah. Which is great, but he says, as Frank says, requires people to come in with know-how and experience. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges there on that. Philip, Frank, I'm going to stay with you. What are the challenges of hosting, marketing, promoting new esports events to the world, particularly in the region? But I guess they're very similar problems, challenges wherever you decide to host an event. What's your kind of understanding of the challenges that are involved in hosting and promoting esports, particularly here? So, what a huge topic! It's
a very good question, and I laughed a little bit because it's not everything about money. Yeah. As I said, it's about experience and knowledge. You can host here, I don't know, maybe a tournament for Mobile Legends, and no one will attend. And even you put a lot of money into it, right, because you have not the reach, you don't have the community. So I think it's very important to understand the market.
Yeah.
And what I said earlier today is you have to know the community, the size of the community, how active a community is for a certain game, and work with this community and build on this. I every time bring up the example from Peru. It's a huge market for Dota 2. Yeah. And if I go there with a different game, I may have no success. But this is, for me, very, very important to see this. And the second point is for esports, it's every time to be authentic. And work with the communities, be authentic. I think then it's a good chance that you can grow it. But you know, from every business, success is not coming overnight. Mm-hmm. So you have to work for that.
Yeah, interesting. No, exactly. Philip, I'm going to come to you. Same question, because you've been hosting some tournaments around the region. You're in Dubai right now. Are there particular challenges of hosting and marketing esports events in Dubai, Jordan, and the Middle East, or are there the same challenges as everywhere?
I think I'll speak to Frank's points slightly here. It's the region as a whole is different. Okay, more in the way that games are played, platform preferences, game titles. So Mobile Legends there, you know, Frank's mentioned it, and Dota 2, okay, neither of those are heavily played within the region. Okay, so trying to come in and do events and tournaments for those games, yes, you're already on the back foot because there isn't that existing community to tap into. Right. So if you do want to launch something here in the region, your starting point should naturally be, okay, which are the popular games and how can I leverage those in the existing communities that are here? What we are seeing, and it's interesting, is that some countries are taking almost the opposite approach, and they're doing that though because of the global scene. Okay, so as an event operator, you will need to make a decision of what is your objective, okay? And I say that because you need to think about a multi-year plan if you take a game that is less popular. Okay, so Dota 2, again, great example. Saudi E-Leagues and Gamers 8 have both used Dota 2 as a game, even though it's not heavily played within the region. I suspect they're doing that because they want to build the pathway to the global community. Okay, so that is going to be a multi-year journey for them to try and increase the player base for that particular game. But if you were somebody who's coming in right now and you needed to set something up and you needed to get traction from your first event, you're better going for one that already has that community, because that's half the battle. You know, if you can pull in the existing communities that are there and then layer additional experiences and opportunities on top, you put yourself in a much better position for success.
Can I just leap in with a follow-up question? Philip, what is the most popular game then? If Dota 2 isn't particularly well played here, it's more played outside the region, what games are you finding are most in demand here as esports?
Great question. And actually, it differs slightly from the Gulf to sort of North Africa and the Levant region, which is, I know where you are at the minute. You know, the Gulf, PUBG Mobile, yes, big favorite. Stats and the streaming stats. Fortnite is there, but again, as you start to move into North Africa, there are a couple of titles that come through, some of the PC titles.
Lost you, I think, there.
Also, League of Legends in Egypt, as an example. Free Fire on the mobile side in North Africa. Challenge.
Great, thank you. Sorry, we
Can you still hear me?
We dropped out for a second there, but we caught up, actually, I think. So that's interesting, very interesting. Actually, before I move on again, same question to you, Frank, obviously on the ePulse platform. What do you find, is there a great variation in what games people are playing from territory to territory?
Yes, of course. If I'm coming back to Dota 2 in this case, but you can replace it with CSGO, with every game. Mm-hmm. You have to know the game and the game community very well. And that means if you're talking about the community, it's not only about what they're spending, it's also how long they're playing, which game they're playing, maybe on which level they're playing. Right. And I think important is to know what I mostly mention in talks, if I give these. It's one example. If you have a live broadcast, and I come back to the to answer the question. If you have a live broadcasting from sports events,
Yeah.
golf, for example, on the old-fashioned TV, 4 out of 10 people watching these tournaments are themselves playing golf.
Right.
If you have soccer or football, it's 1 out of 10. I really love football and playing football, but maybe I'm too old for that. If it's coming to games, what do you think? How many people are themselves playing games, watching games?
Interesting. I would expect most of them, but I don't know what's the...
10 out of 10.
Is that right? Yeah, okay.
This is now coming back to it. So it's not only about that they are playing the game, they're also watching the game.
Interesting.
So if you can then do some analytics about the game, the community where it is, then you can follow, if it's regional, even local, follow where are these communities are and work with these games. And then you can grow it in other regions. So for us, this is very, very important to look into games and to mention that it's for esports, it's not only Dota 2, there's Valorant and CSGO, of course, a platform and other games.
That's interesting. I'm going to stay with you, actually, Frank, while we're talking about esports as a sport and tournaments. Just on a more general note, does esports now feel legitimate as a sport? Because you mentioned there, like soccer and so on. Esports was recently removed as an activity in the Commonwealth Games. It had, in fact, been in there briefly with much fanfare, but it's out again. And I hear anecdotally that esports players find it harder to get visas to travel than regular sports players. This morning, in one of the conversations here, we were talking about how maybe here in Jordan, having a career in games is not so well accepted as it is in perhaps America, where everyone is kind of aware of the size of the games industry. Do you think that esports feels like a legitimate way to be a professional yet?
Esports is a very young industry, and if you compare to any other industries, they are not really established structures. We are growing, and this is the opportunity everyone has. Yes, we are living in Singapore for over 10 years now, and this is a small country. And in Singapore, parents hope that their kids are becoming a lawyer,
Doctor,
accountant, a doctor. So if they come up and they say, "Oh, I want to be an esports athlete," they run an problem. But it's changing. It's changing because the government, institutions are behind this. And secondly, it's so important that not only esports organizations, also sports clubs, brands, association, shows that it's a really industry. But yes, we have to grow it, and this is when we started, when I talked about structure. We need these structures, what other industry or maybe sports already have. And I think it's the same here in the region, that you need these enthusiasm activities from the youth to go into this area, to follow this dream, maybe not be the, I don't know, next lawyer, maybe to be the next esports athlete. And with one of our clubs, for example, there's a player from India, he earns a lot of money yearly, only playing games, and get then maybe advertisements, marketing partners, sponsor partners.
Yeah, interesting. And Philip, is that your experience as well? Does esports now feel legitimate as a sport, as a professional sport? What's your experience of running those tournaments in Dubai, for instance?
This is actually a challenging question for me, because it depends on how you look at the world. And I say that because, yes, we've had the Commonwealth experience, and there are some similarities to what we see in traditional sports. And we see a lot of the traditional sports roles now coming into esports, whether that's the team side or the business side. And there is an experience there as a player and competing and playing on stage, but you could also say it's entertainment. It's like WWE. Okay, so it's like, does it need to be legitimized as a sport? Does it need to be legitimized as entertainment? Is that easier for people to understand? And okay, what does that mean for the future? I know in some countries, for example, if it does get classed as a sport, that can actually open up government funding.
Right.
Okay, so there's an opportunity there, and the UK is one of those examples. I know the British Esports Association have been looking at that because they know they'll be able to get additional funding if esports is classed as a sport. So I think there's a challenge there of saying, if it is a sport, what are the positives and negatives of that? Is it better to position it as entertainment? And actually, esports athletes at the top level are entertainers. And does that make it easier to get visas and participate and do everything else we want to do? I think the other thing that we are starting to see, and it's probably another 5 or so years, is that my generation, okay, so I'm 38, slightly younger than Frank.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I disagree a little bit with what Philip said with entertainment. I think esports is guiding sports how to entertain through sports.
Interesting.
If you're looking to Formula One, for example, and I think everyone agrees that Formula One is sports. If you see to this, they start on Friday and it runs until Sunday. And the real sport is 2 hours
Right.
on Sunday night. Everything else is entertainment. And then let me ask the question, if it's entertainment or sports. I think this is what the gaming industry and the esports industry can deliver. And if you look how many sports stars, Steph Curry from the Warriors, the king from, they're playing not so good at the moment, from the Lakers, James, everyone invested in. Why are sports, NBA as an association, or even sports clubs went into it? It's marketing, yes, but it's entertainment.
Yeah.
And one last question is, especially NBA, when they started to work with gaming and esports, they realized that gamer or esports athletes or spectators watching a game from a different perspective. So what they did was, I think it's 3 seasons ago, they changed the camera angle because they learned for a live streaming of a game that gamers watching from a different position. So, and then again, I ask again the question, is this entertainment, is this sports? But for me, it's very, very clear that esports gaming shows the way for sports into entertainment.
Yeah, that's very good. And in fact, there are other things that esports does very well that, let's say, regular sports could learn from. The kind of the conversation that goes on between participants, that kind of thing, the actual live viewing of it and chat and things like that. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I am going to see if anyone wants to ask any questions from the audience. But I'm going to come here with another question there. You mentioned, I think both did briefly, but Philip particularly mentioned this, the kind of roles that are involved in esports that are coming in. We spoke a little bit about investment and education, but all the roles that come in to support the esports ecosystem. How are professional players supported across the region at the moment? And maybe this is interesting about the whole world, but are we finding that there are big differences in things like their sports psychologists, media support, contracts, all this kind of thing? Is there all the industry that surrounds players in the esports industry, are they getting the support that they need? And is that different here in the Middle East than it is in, let's say, America or Korea, where esports are already huge? Philip, what do you think? What's the whole kind of support structure like for esports players right now?
If we take the global scene, then yes, those pro teams have the additional roles in place. Nutritionists, psychologists, fitness coaches, all those sorts of things are now starting to be put in place to support the well-being of the players, so that they have, peak performance is what the teams are looking for. If we talk about here in the region, it's starting, but there's a long way to go. And the biggest reason for that is if you were to list all of the top teams in the region for the different games, you would probably say 6, maybe 10 could be classed as pro teams. Okay. Which means then there isn't necessarily the infrastructure there for those teams because they're focusing on, okay, the players getting to events, representing the region, that's been their key focus. So those additional roles, while they're being introduced globally to pro teams that have, had a $20 million investment round, we're not at that point yet for the region. So it will come, but we also need to build the rest of the infrastructure and create more pro teams, and then we'll start to see more of those roles and opportunities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Frank, obviously you run a platform for hosting tournaments, so you're part of the wider ecosystem. What's your analysis of all this sort of support structure that goes around professional esports? Do you agree with Philip? Is it there already? Is it coming?
It's coming, yes. It's in some parts, yeah, it's there. I think a lot of governments, institutions have to learn about the opportunity, not only in esports and gaming in itself, because for me, gaming and esports, it's nothing what you can separate.
Okay.
And so I think it belongs to both a little bit. How strong the games industry is acknowledged in a country from a government. If you're looking especially to esports, I can, for example, mention Malaysia. They created in 2018, where we helped the government to establish a pathway for youth in esports. This was a project from the government. And they put it under the Family and Youth Ministry. Because why? Because they saw this chance to create jobs. And if we are looking to esports, it's based on games. So it's not only esports, it has to do even with local gaming companies, with global gaming companies, and everything around it. So I think once a government is much more behind that, then it's a good chance to get this. And why happened it in Malaysia? There was a lot of players,
right,
and they played. And there was a lot of gamers. They watched and live streaming. They watched, I don't know, games content, so that the government, and I think every government is observing the country, what happens, especially in the development of industries, and they saw, okay, there is a huge interest, there's a change, what Philip says as well. He is a younger generation. They grew up with games, they play, they understand it more and more. The governments maybe more younger people. So they understand it and see it. So yeah, it's a way, but it's, I think, together games and esports.
I've got a follow-up question, actually. You mentioned this before, just on your previous point that you made about how it's 10 out of 10 people who watch esports probably play games as well. And to your comment you were just making there about games and about people engaging with games. As a developer, and there are many developers in the audience today making games, how do you balance the need of regular multiplayer games with it becoming an esport? Is there some kind of balance that you need to find as game makers and game publishers, that the game can remain fun for amateur players as well as being something that's viewable as a professional sport?
That's a very good question. I think when we do provide the esports management courses, it's not everything about esports. It's also about game development. Yeah. Because as an esports manager, you have to understand game development. And if you work together, so very simple, it's an API to get it into an esports runner platform to capture data. It's one step. I think there is a big connection. And yes, you can create with tournaments much more excitement. What you also can create is retention. so people coming back or engagement, and then you can spread it out in content, in tournaments, whatever you want. So from my perspective, this is why I'm here and why I think it's a good opportunity, and thank you to you and Chris and the team to have the opportunity to open a little bit more the space to see what opportunities are here for game developers and esports platforms to work together to create more business, what we want everyone, but also create more excitement for the community.
That makes sense. Thank you. And I want to give people a chance to ask a question, but Philip, did you want to wade in on my point there?
Yeah, so I'm going to be controversial and take almost an opposing view, and that is developers and the publishers don't determine an esport. The community does. Esports was built by passionate players who wanted more. A lot of the tools weren't there in the early days, and although we're starting to see developers and publishers put them in place, it's still based on whether the players want to adopt them. Do they set up their own communities? Do they set up their own tournaments? What's the participation like? Then a developer and a publisher can say, okay, there's interest here for more than just the traditional play style or playing of the game that they've created. Once they have that from the community and the players, then they're in a better position to try and create an esports structure around it. If they come out of the gate and say, this is going to be an esports, we've already seen examples where that's failed horribly from a number of different developers and publishers.
Yeah, very true, very true. We're coming almost to the end now. We've got a couple of questions, a couple of minutes left for questions. So do we have any questions from the audience for our experts? Oh, one in the middle there. Hello, I've got it. Thank you very much. If you wait for the mic, then they can hear you on the camera and in the booth as well. So, thank you.
First, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, my name is Yusuf, and this is my friend Khalid. This question is from both of us. As we have seen, governments are taking esports more seriously every day, and the gaming industry in general. So, do you think that in the future there will be the same tournaments that happens in real sports, such as World Cup, or maybe there will be esports leagues, such as in FIFA or the NBA?
That great question. Thank you. So I'll open it up to our panelists. Did you catch that? Will we have a World Cup for esports as it takes on more, as it gets the investment and support from governments and is taken more seriously? What's the how far can it go? Philip, do you want to launch in there?
Well, I would say we already have World Cups. They're just for each individual game. So there's a question of, are you trying to bring multiple games together and actually determine who is the best gamer across multiple titles to claim a World Cup? Because we have the PUBG World Championship going on in Dubai at the minute. We've just had the Worlds for League of Legends. There are world championships for different games going on all the time. I think it's about what is defined as a World Cup. Does it need to be something that's brought together and it's one location and multiple games at the same time? That's going to be challenging because of the IP owners and the games themselves. Is it about trying to bring more properties to the region? That's starting to happen. And I think it'll be a case of needing to grow the local communities to be able to have the governments justify saying, we want to bring these events because we now have the local following, we have the community. Historically, over the past couple of years, the region has brought those big events, but they've not been well populated because they've been for games that aren't popular in those particular countries. So I think there's a challenge there of what you choose and how you choose to do it.
I think the second part of the question was about the role of a big global unifying organization like FIFA or something like this. Was that the question? And whether such a thing either exists or should exist for esports as well. Does that factor into what you're...
Well, you have the government or the entities trying to be governing bodies. So you have IESF, and Frank will be able to add into this as well. And you've got you've got some player bodies, you've got WSF, and it's like, okay, there's a mix of people trying to do things, but you still have that same challenge. FIFA is just for football, okay? in gaming and esports, you have 25 different games, if not more, who have different publishers and different owners. So getting them all on the same table and to have the same agenda is going to be a challenge. And that's where esports, it's easier to say, you know what, this is a world championship for this one particular game, okay? And if you're a fan of this game, great, you're going to follow that, you're going to be aware of what's going on, that's going to be your focus.
Thank you. Yes, Frank, what's your take on that?
I think for the first part of the question, that what I mentioned in the beginning, structure. And this is coming not only from a publisher, so also from a community. What the community wants to achieve with that. So what Philip mentioned, that it goes from the community. So every game needs the grassroots to grow. I think that's very important, so that you can establish structures. If we look in this case to Dota 2, there is already a league structure. If we like it or not, that's a different question, but there is. We have it. Secondly, I have a very strong opinion on these global associations. They have all not the interest for players or teams. That's private companies. They want to establish tournaments. If this is the right way, the future will show it. I think it's much more a collaboration between community leaders or communities with publishers, how to set up structures. If we need a World Cup with, or like the Olympics, 25 different games at one time, I don't know. I think that's more up to the gaming community to find a way for that. But yeah, I think the good thing is, and I think that's where Philip and I agree on it, is that we need the grassroots, the community, to stay authentic, to be active, with the support of publishers and developers.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you very much. That takes us exactly to time, and we have 3 more sessions of the day to go. So I'm going to stop there and suggest if you have any further questions, probably you can find these guys around the. Certainly, you can find Frank around the venue. You can probably contact both guys through the Meet to Match or online. But let me give a round of applause with you all to Philip Wride and Frank Sliwka. Thank you very much.
Thank you.